Hey, I've got a Fender twin reverb to play with. It looks like it's about, according to the serial number, about a 1971, and the person that brought it to me says it pops and cracks and generally just hasn't had any apparently work done on it in some time, and he would just like me to check it out and see what needs to be done. So far, only thing I've noticed is that some of the pots are popping and cracking. That was one of the complaints he had, and also it doesn't seem like the reverb works. Even with the foot switch activated, it doesn't work. The tremolo, on the other hand, does work. You can go around here and find the foot switch. Vibrato. It looks pretty original on the front as far as the grill cloth and the foot switch, and some of the tubes are pretty old. The speakers have been replaced. It's got some JBLs in there. They don't sound too bad. And so anyway, we're just going to check this thing out and see what the inside's. Always love to see what the chassis looks like on the inside. Looking around in the back of the amp a little bit more, there's part of the tube chart is still there. Too bad all of it's not there, but at least part of it's there. And I don't think you can see, but it has AB76 and the rest of it's ripped off, so it's an AB763 or 769 probably. And I'm going to take this out. As I said, I'm going to take the speaker plug out and remove the vibrato and the reverb pedal plugs. And then as far as the leads that go to the reverb tank itself, I'm going to pull out the reverb output and input. Somebody's already put a piece of tape around the input. I always like to mark them with a marker or something like that so that I can tell which one they came off. You can figure it out, but it just saves you a little time. So the input is going to be the one that has the tape on it. Take those loose, and I'll need to take a screw out over here that holds the power cord down, and then take out the 4 mounting bolts up on top, and then the chassis should be ready to slide out. And then I'll put it up on the bench and we'll see how it looks inside. Okay, with the amp out of the case and up on the bench here, with the components exposed, we now want to take a first step here, which is a safety measure. We want to discharge the filter capacitors, which are actually mounted on the other side of the chassis, but they're connected to points on the circuit here, and they can hold a charge for some time, and you know, they can be 400 to 500 volts, so we don't want to get shocked by touching anything on this side of the chassis here. So the first thing to do to be safe is to take a setup like this, which is just a clip lead, has alligator clips on each end, and has a in this case a 220 ohm 5-watt resistor. And it's not critical what the value is, but it would just be a resistance that we can then connect one end of the jumper to chassis ground, and then the other end we want to touch to some points on the chassis and discharge whatever potential energy they would still have on them to ground through this resistor. You just don't want to make this resistor too large, or it would take too long for it to discharge. So kind of a medium value, 100 to 1,000 ohms would be good. And we're just going to go and touch it to some key points with the amp unplugged, of course. Some key points here that feed up from the bottom of the chassis. And a good point is on these power tubes where these large screen grid resistors are. Touch to both ends of those. Now if you did this without a resistor, you'd probably be getting some sparks, and I just don't like sparks, is the reason I do it with a resistor in there. And you just hold it on for several seconds to let it discharge. Do it on both sides. Then another good point would be to come back on some of these plate resistors here, and that one's hard to get to, but where they come together, let me find a better example. Here, where these two plate resistors come together, we'll touch it there. Here, two plate resistors, we'll touch here. And we can go through and do it for all of those. And then we should have all of our capacitors discharged. Take a peek in here. And the first thing to do is to just look around the chassis and look for anything unusual, burn marks, obviously broken or bad components. Some things that I saw right away, find something to point with. The owner said sometimes it had fired out some sparks and he didn't know why. Well, here's a screw loose right up underneath here, and I see another screw. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's another screw right down in here. I don't know where they came from, but they're floating around in the chassis here. And loose parts are not good. Loose metal objects are not good inside of a tube amplifier or any electrical piece of equipment. So we have the what they refer to as the chocolate drop coupling capacitors in here. They work okay. They don't tend to break down, but some people prefer to use better quality capacitors here and think that it improves the signal. So that's an option that we'll give the owner if he wants to do that. There's also a chassis stamp in here that indicates it was manufactured March 15th, 1971. It's upside down, but still, that's what it says, March 15th, 1971. So that agrees with the serial number that was on the chassis. Interesting to know fact. Some other capacitors here. These are electrolytics, which they have a habit of deteriorating over time. It looks like it has the original ones in there. I don't really see anything wrong with them, but those are candidates for replacement if we do a cap job on this. The other thing to look at are the screen grid resistors, these 470 ohm resistors, those big resistors right down there, trying to hold the light on it. Right down in here, there's one on each of the 6L6 tubes between a couple of the power high voltage leads on that tube. So sometimes those are burned or cracked. Those appear to be okay. We can check them later with an ohm meter. The disc caps don't tend to change in value with age or break down so much. Some of these bypass capacitors are electrolytics. They can break down. Some capacitors have been changed. I see a few in here. I'm not really sure yet why. Another thing to look at is solder. I haven't seen any yet, but part of this procedure would be to check the solder connections, make sure there's not cracks, maybe touch them all up. Here's another capacitor right down here that has been updated. That wouldn't be a 1971 type capacitor. So I think that's about all. Here are the pots up here on the underside that we would want to clean while we're working on it, and the jacks also get corroded, dirty, and part of refurbishing this amp will be to clean those. And so that's all I'm going to say about the underside. We're going to flip it over and take a look at the housing of the filter caps and take a look at the filter caps. Okay, got the chassis flipped over here, and this is where the filter caps reside. Just take a look around here. They've got some Mesa Boogie power tubes in here for 6L6s. So it's not the original tubes. Obviously they would be Fender tubes, I guess, if they were original. But these look like they've been in here for some time. Different brands of tubes in preamp section. Looks like all of those have been changed out over the years. But little spider nest there. It's been sitting around for some time. I'm very curious of what the filter caps would look like, whether they've ever been changed out or whether it has the original ones in there and what condition they're in. So to get to that, whoops, excuse me, we're going to take out the 4 screws to hold that on. My camera angle sometimes gets messed up because I forget I'm holding a camera in one hand. So sometimes filter capacitors, electrolytics have a pasty kind of a chemical substance inside of them that dry up over time, and then the capacitors don't work so well, and they can cause shorts, hums in the amp, bad sounds, damage to transformers, all kinds of bad things. So it's one of the primary things on refurbishing a real old amp, particularly one that hasn't been used a whole lot. Okay, that was really stuck down good, and that took 2 hands for me to get it off. I had to pull up on this while I turned the screw to get it to back out, and then the can was really stuck down too, and it took a lot of effort to get that loose. Let me look underneath here and see something still. There we go. So we had some goop on the inside of the lid there. Oh, I see. It's really melted down. They put that substance on there. It's like a rubber material that's cemented into the lid, and I've never taken one apart that it was that sticky and messy. So, but what it does is it just holds them flat so that they can't vibrate and move around. But these are the original capacitors, I'm pretty sure, that came in the amp. So they've been in there for many years, and I'm going to look at the ends of these capacitors, and what you can see is, particularly on the plus end where there's a rubber end, it's got some little spots, and it's puffing out on some of these. Let's look at the other end. You don't see as much, but on this one, where's my pointer? Down on this end, there's a blob of the material that should be inside the capacitor that's come out. So although I didn't hear any hum when I was playing it, these are definitely due for replacement, and this would be one of the top priorities in refurbishing this amp and making it last and play well for a while, is to replace these. Now, I don't have to be careful touching these now because I discharged all these from the other side of the chassis, but if you were opening these up without having gone through that process of using the lead with the resistor on the end of it grounded, then you should discharge all the capacitors here and just do both ends of them so that you don't have to figure out which end's ground and which end's got power on it. So that's what I see from the top side here. While I'm waiting on some parts to come in to do the cap replacement on the amp here, I've decided to check out the Reverb, and I went ahead and took the Reverb out of the cabinet and have it up where I can connect it up and do some testing with the amp. Got the amp turned on. By the way, whenever you have the amp powered on the bench, you want to connect a speaker cable back to the speakers in the cabinet or to a test set of speakers, just so that you have a load on the output transformer of the amp. And I checked out the Reverb tank while I had it out, and all the connections seem to be good, both on the input and the output. Springs are all in place. By the way, if you want to see a video specifically on reverb tank repair and reverb repair, then I have another video on a twin reverb that goes into more detail and shows taking the tank out and actually finding a problem in the tank and repairing it. You might want to check that out. But since I've done that, I didn't show you all the process of taking it out of the case and all that. So it's sitting here, and now it seems to work okay. We've got reverb. The only thing I can determine is that the cable connections are maybe possibly dirty. I don't see anything. Nothing seems to be intermittent on the cables. They seem to be sound. I've tried wiggling. V3 tube, which is the driver for the reverb. I'm going to clean the tube socket there. That could possibly have been a problem, but it seems to be working now. So I'm going to do the normal maintenance on a reverb, which would be to clean the connections, check the cables, and like I said, I will clean the tube socket on V3. I'll clean all the tube sockets just to make sure they're making good contact. And so that's it for right now.